All right, I think we're rolling. Guys, welcome to the Sean and Sack show, whatever the hell this is called. Excuse me. We're wearing the same clothes that we were wearing yesterday. Saxony can't stop laughing. My brain literally is not working.
Well, I knew I was wearing them.
I was like, maybe we should not do... What?
I said, I knew I was wearing yesterday's clothes. And then when you walked up to sit down, I was like, and so are you.
Well, we
How about that?
We went and we had date night last night, and we went up to Sundance, and we spent the night at Sundance. And we had planned to get up and come back early and go to the gym and the whole thing. But that doesn't work out when you wake up and there's, 16 inches of snow. And so we decided to have more sex. And we put our clothes on, and I came straight to the office, and here we are. No one literally gives a flying fuck about any of this, but this is what we're talking about. Oh, guys, welcome to the show.
Maybe we're more relatable than we were.
Yeah.
There's some,
you know what, though? We had to do it because we missed last week, and I don't want to miss anymore. I can't. And so even if my brain doesn't work and we're wearing the same fucking stinky clothes, we're going to do the podcast.
We might be extra funny today.
Maybe.
What
are we talking about today, babe?
Tell everybody. I'd like to talk about forgiveness.
Okay.
Such a powerful...
We were chatting earlier.
Yep.
And tell everybody what we were chatting about, what we wanted to talk about.
Just the power of forgiveness in relationships. Because things happen. And then it's like if you're living, like Bryce was saying earlier, like if you're living in the 4 agreements, forgiveness is kind of like, it's not about you in the first place. So there's not a lot of forgiveness to be had necessarily. But there are moments when one person's triggered or they're hurt by something or whatnot. And it's like when you sit in front of your partner, you get a choice, right? Do I forgive? Do I see this as part of the process of you just growing as a human being? Or do I sit and judge you? And that's where this resentment now is going on. And this exists. So that's why I want to talk about it. Because in an ideal world, in a perfect world, we'd all live in the 4 agreements and we'd have no problems and no one would take anything personally. But we do. Right. We have glitches in the matrix. We do have this happen. And so that was, I feel like, is a powerful topic for today's conversation.
We talked about this a little bit last night on date night. And I had a conversation with a friend yesterday. And we were talking about his marriage and frustrations and things along those lines. And it kind of turned into one of those, like, this is where she's at and this is what's going on and the whole thing. And I just, in listening to him, I just stopped and I said, simple question, are you all in? And he kind of thought about it for a second. He's like, no. And it's interesting because we find ourselves in relationships like judging what other people are doing and we're doing it. We expect all in, but we don't go all in. We expect forgiveness, compassion, empathy, love, and yet we judge the shit out of our partners. And it's interesting because, like, in really thinking about a relationship, and this is something we were talking about earlier, like, I mean, you and I having wedges between us does nothing for us. Speaking very individually, it does nothing for me. Me being angry at you, me being resentful of you, me holding on to bullshit from 1, 2, 6, 12 months ago literally does nothing for me.
Right.
It does nothing for us. If anything, it detracts from what could be, right? Mm-hmm. And this is something that I was very much, I did this for years and years and years and years. And it was almost like keeping a scorecard or keeping score of like, well, you did these 10 things and here's why you're down on the list, or this is why I'm carrying this chip on my shoulder. And when you really step back and think about it, no one wins in that situation, right? Like, let's just assume for a second you're listening to this and you're married, okay? Married. She always makes fun of me. Let's just assume for a second you're married and you have drama in the past and you have history and you have problems and this and that and the other. That's real. It's real. To say, well, forget about it, you can't forget about it because it's real. You have thoughts. You have a very conscious reality of, well, she did this or he did this, and you can't, including me, no one can say, well, just forget about it and move on, because you can't forget about it, right? Yeah. But the truth of the matter is, if you contemplate that, like, what does me holding on to any of this, whether it's an emotional connection to it, whether it's an aspect of resentment, it literally does nothing for me, and energetically, in my personal opinion, it completely drives a wedge between us.
Right.
All the time. It's kind of that whole subconscious thing. Like your subconscious it's going to come out. You talk about like you want to hear the truth, get somebody hammered, right? You get them all liquored up, and then there's no filter. There's no ego. There's no bullshit. Somebody's just going to freaking fly off the handle and tell you the truth, right? And that's typically when people will argue or get frustrated. You have a couple cocktails. Next thing you know, you're saying this, you're saying that. Well, what you're getting is a lot more truth because the person has less of a filter or less of an ego or less of holding on. But imagine that for 2 seconds. I mean, energetically, me being mad about something from last week or last month or last year, you know, I get a lot of people that hit me up that say, my husband did this or my wife did this and I can't forgive him for it. Well, what are you going to do? Yeah. I mean, we can stay together and
so
not
you're
trust the person. So you're going to stay in a
miserable space for a long time.
Yeah.
Great.
You literally have 2 choices. Well, 3. Choice number 1 is to stay angry, to never forgive them, and to have a really shitty existence, which transcends your relationship. Chances are you're angry at yourself. Chances are you're not healthy. Chances are you got a lot of, you personally have a lot of issues if you choose not to forgive somebody. You can, forgive them, and you can realize that I have a lot of stuff that you could probably be angry at me for and hold on to. Yeah. But the real fascinating reality behind this is that you're never going to truly grow so long as you're attached to shit from the past. Yep. And I believe that 150%. And this is what, I was talking to my buddy about. I'm like, look, man, I mean, they've been married for, years and years and years and years, over 15 years. And I'm like, you guys are already balls deep in this deal. You've already gone through hell, right? You've been through divorces and bankruptcies and money issues and all kinds of other stuff. It's like you've already proven the test of we can weather storms, right? Mm-hmm. We can weather these hard storms. So at the end of the day, like if you're holding on to any of that stuff, how does that help you grow at all today? You know what I'm saying? And I think what's really powerful in this conversation and what we were talking about before is when you talk forgiveness, when you talk the 4 agreements, you realize that your partner's going to fuck up and you're going to fuck up. Yep. And I don't need to, I don't need to forgive you because the reality is I've already moved past these things. Mm-hmm. And so I think a really interesting check for people is individually to step back and say, am I holding on to shit with my lover? Am I holding on to shit with my husband or my wife? And if you are, the real question is, why? What hasn't been resolved, number 1? Number 2, why are you holding on to it? Why are you using this card from a year ago or 2 years ago or 10 years ago? For what purpose? Mm-hmm. To play at some future hand? If you think about just that mentality of you holding on to something to use sometime in the future, there is probably nothing more detrimental to your relationship. There's nothing more detrimental to your growth or to your trust if you're holding on to something. If you have that, quote, ace in the hole, that one thing, I'm going to drop this on you in the future when I need to like really score points or prove that I'm right or whatever. Right. You're literally, it's like poking holes in your own ship. You're trying to freaking sail the ship and you're literally poking holes in the ship every single day, wondering why the ship is sinking. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at forgiveness too, is like, I'll put myself in the hot seat. I'll do things and I'll notice I do them and I'll sit there like, shit, that was stupid. Or I'm hormonal and I'm sick and I said some shit that I totally didn't mean. Oh, you mean and
like yesterday?
Like yesterday. Yep. That's why I wanted to talk about this. So I'm like, I was kind of like, I was super moody. I feel like shit. I had the flu. And I noticed myself energetically in a space I didn't like, that I wasn't necessarily conscious of until I was conscious of it. So I get to forgive that. I get to forgive not being aware in myself. Like, because we also have to learn that it's really powerful to forgive ourselves. And if we are self-correcting all the time, that at least we're moving forward, right? And so I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, I'm the worst person ever, because that's bullshit too. It's just like, man, I was in a bad space. I said some shit that I totally don't even mean. I just am coming from a place of law. And I owned that. I came to you, I'm like, listen, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And even I believe there's a lot of power in asking for forgiveness. And it doesn't necessarily mean that like you have the power and I need you to forgive me. It's that I want to own my shit. Like if I fuck up, like I'm not too prideful to be like, hey, I was in a shitty space and I'm sorry that I said that. And but if I'm going to say I'm sorry, I mean it. Yeah. Like I don't say I'm sorry because I continued to do the same thing over and over and over and over. And honestly, like when I went to you and said that, it's like, I didn't really care what you said back. I didn't care if you did forgive me, because that's
right.
That's also, I'm aware that like, if you want to continue to be mad at me, or if you want to throw names or throw shade or do whatever, you can do that, but that has nothing to do with me. But it's part of my growth and me being a human that's constantly evolving, wanting to become better. Part of it is like, I let my pride down and I go to you knowing that I said I was out of line. You didn't say I was out of line. I did. Said, hey, I acknowledge this. I just want you to know I acknowledge this. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And that to me, it's like, and then I move on with my life.
Right. Well, and me too.
Yeah.
Like if I hang on to that, and this is a huge topic because this happens a ton in relationships. Like I don't know
like,
that there's very many
episode.
relationships that don't have this experience. But you know, we're living, and this might sound really elementary to a lot of people, but like we're both living this experience. We're both having this experience. But I've found not only in myself, but in working with a lot of different people, like we hold on to shit for so long. For really, there's no good that comes of it. There's no good of me holding on to something, or you being fucking ridiculous yesterday, and me hanging on to that for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I was pissed. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, I did that Q&A on Facebook, and somebody's like, "So how are you feeling today?" I was like, "I'm angry." They're like, "Oh my God, why?" I'm like, "No, you asked me the question. I'm fucking mad. My wife's being a fucking lunatic, and I want to throw her off the fucking balcony. Yeah, I'm pissed off right now, right?"
Surely needs an IV sedation, but yeah, whatever.
I mean, I in that moment, it was one of those things where I was like, "Yeah, you are being a fucking lunatic. It's not kosher. It's not cool. You said what you said." But I went to the gym yesterday afternoon, and it was like, it was one of those things where it was like, I have a choice. And these are the conversations that I have with myself every day. I have a choice. You can be mad. You can be frustrated. You can go home and be a dick. It's date night, whatever. Mm-hmm. But what does that serve you? What does that do for you?
Yeah.
And I've lived, to be completely candid, I've lived most of my life carrying a chip on my shoulder about something or someone or some deal or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think this is the true level of accountability and ownership, is understanding that, every single person that you interact with, specifically your lover, specifically your intimate relationships, they're all going to fuck up, just like you're going to fuck up, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I want to have the most energy possible, and there's a lot of conversations that people will probably have with this topic and saying, well, yeah, but they really fucked up. They really did this. And it's like, okay, that might be true. But you holding on to frustration, anger, bitterness, resentment, how does that serve you? Yep. How does it help you? Yeah. And just go down the checkbox list. Number 1, is this helping you? Mm-hmm. Is this making you more money? Is you being angry, bitter, frustrated making you more money? Yes or no? Is it getting you in better shape? Yes or no? Is it helping you become more insightful in your business? Is you being angry, bitter, whatever, towards your lover making you a better parent? Does this make you a better mother, a better father? The answer to this is like, no, right? And then the big question is this helping us?
Yeah. Is
me being mad about something from however long ago, right? And we hear this forgiveness thing. It's kind of this hippy dip. You got to forgive yourself. And also, I don't care how you want to word it, but me holding on to any of that shit does nothing for me. It does nothing for us. And I truly believe it does. It actually is very detrimental. Yeah. So long as you have those things that you're holding on to and you're pissed about, or you want to have that card to play, your life is just going to be shit. It truly will. And so, you use the word forgiveness, and it's got kind of that, for me, it's just got that hippy-dippy connotation. Forgive yourself. I don't think people really understand what that means.
It's like letting it go with an open heart, being like, you literally has nothing to do with you anymore.
This is where, you and I had this conversation not too long ago about like realizing that you could do whatever you want in this relationship, and it has nothing to do with me.
Right.
I mean, we really stop and think about that. Like most people say, well, you can't control other people, which is true, but they did all this other stuff, and this is what happened to me. And you break it down to the real finite level, like you're driving down the street and some fucking asshole comes out and hits you or whatever. Is it their fault? Is you chose to drive down that street? The market crashed and I lost all my money. You're going to blame the market? You're the one that invested the money, right? You choose to get into a relationship with somebody, but then you hang on to frustration and bitterness and anger, or they don't do this or they do this, and then all of a sudden you expect to have this euphoric reality. You expect to have this great fucking marriage and relationship while you're the one choosing to be angry, choosing to be pissed off. And I promise you that there's nothing that you'll do. There's nothing that Saxony will do that will magically, like, I don't want to say erase or forgive or whatever. The past, there's nothing you could say. Like you say, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. I'm not a huge fan of the I'm sorry. I'm a much bigger fan of the thank you for letting me know. But, we can talk more about that later.
Yeah.
But it's my choice.
Exactly.
It's 100% my choice.
And that's why I said, like, I like to say I'm sorry because that vibes with me.
Right.
I don't say I'm sorry because I know you actually you'd rather me not say I'm sorry. Yeah. But it works for me.
Yeah.
And you have now, we've been together long enough where you get that.
Right.
You're like, all right. One thing I want to link into is if you were to look at a timeline of like our relationship, when we used to have conflict, they would last. And I've stepped back and I've noticed, I'm like, what changed? Where's the evolution? And this is the beautiful thing is it's like, even if things are only shifting 1%, a quarter of a percent at a time forward, they're shifting forward. And I want you guys to really like acknowledge that. Is there even slight change for the better? If that's true, then you're in a fucking good place. You're in a great place.
100%.
Like, we're old dogs and it's hard to learn new tricks, right? Especially when you've been single and independent so long. So like, I fixate on that. And I'm like, that's one thing is that I have that in my head is I'm like, we're always progressing forward, even if it's small or if it's large, we're progressing forward, and before a huge thing that was different too is there was a time when we weren't all in. We were all in, but we weren't all in. And
we said we were. The ego was like, oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And in that gray space of all in, when truly I don't think that we realized we weren't all in, even though we said we were, is there was a level of unsafety. And
is that a word?
What?
Unsafety? Unsafe.
Unsafe. What? Okay.
Whatever.
Unsafe. There was a level of feeling unsafe. Let's say that. Where if conflict happened, I didn't feel that there was enough safety in the relationship because there was no all in.
Right.
That when there was issues, they were so much bigger because there was no. I don't want to use words that make this sound like there's no boundaries or weakness because that's not. We're actually the complete opposite. But there was no safety net of I'm allowed to screw up. You're allowed to screw up. And yet we're still safe within this vessel of our relationship. Right. And that took a long time for me personally to trust that we have a safe vessel of our all-in relationship. And it's because we over time, we built that to be what it is. We didn't declare it to be. We had enough proof and action within our the dance of this relationship through conflict, through good times, through hard times, through all the to realize that there was trust and safety. And that way now when things happen, it's like I trust the fact that like we're growing. And I let things go. I let things go with you because before I would hold on to things like, oh God, that sucked. That really hurt. And now I realize I'm like, hey, this guy too is evolving. This is great.
But how did that, so I want you to talk about that.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Because I disagree with you slightly.
Okay.
1.0 when we were dating, like, we weren't all in. We both knew it, right? 2.0 though, it wasn't that we had been together, that we had all this history, that we were starting to learn to trust each other, that we were, I don't believe that at all. It was a singular choice. You chose to be all in. Like, you made a choice. You made it, I mean, whether I did or you made a choice that you were going to be all in. You told me about that, right?
Yeah.
And I had to come to that reality as well, and I want people to really understand what we're talking about, because the idea that somehow you're going to learn to trust somebody and you're going to evolve into this dynamic, it's the same thing we talk about with dating. If you try dating, right, and you're closed off, you're walled off, you're protecting your heart because it's been hurt, you've been screwed, you've been wronged, you've been lied to, you've been cheated on. So I'm going to like lock up my heart, lock up my soul, lock up my everything. I'm not going to trust anybody until you prove to me that I can trust you. Well, the reality is you're never going to get to that space so long as you are closed off. You're never going to get there. Like imagine, we've talked about this dozens of times, especially on the podcast.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to find love, quote unquote, find love. You're dating people. You're wanting to find love. You're wanting to connect, but you're doing it from a completely closed off space. You're trying to protect your heart. You're trying to protect, pain and the entire thing. How will you ever actually trust until you trust? How will you ever be in a relationship that's all in until you are all in? Not the other person, not waiting for the other person. And so I wanted to clarify that, and maybe saying disagree is not the right word, but you made a choice regardless of what I did, regardless of we did. You made a singular decision that you were going to be all in.
Yeah. And I completely agree with that.
Right?
I guess what I'm saying is it's like untying old knots
Right.
of old patterns, of old thinking, distrust in myself.
Right.
Like I even came to you months ago, maybe even years ago now, where I was like, I realized that it wasn't that I didn't trust you. It's that I didn't trust at all.
Right.
Like I didn't trust me
and that's my,
in love.
Right. And that's my point.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of people listening right now think that, okay, well, we've had a ton of turmoil in our marriage. We've had a ton of bullshit. There's been deceit. There's been lies. There's been cheating. There's been whatever it is, right? To whatever extreme you want to go to. Until you choose a singular moment and say, this is new. This is the new chapter.
Yeah.
You're never going to be able to move past any of this. And I think that's what I wanted you to talk more about is like, you made a choice to be all in.
Yep.
And that was when you chose to trust. That was when you chose to all of these other things. And truly, it had nothing to do with me.
No,
it had
didn't.
nothing to do with us. And I know because I had that same experience.
Yeah.
I was sitting on the fence. I was playing small. I wasn't all in.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I said that I did that I truly made that 100% pivot, said I'm all in. And that meant like literally doing everything radically different. It had nothing to do with you, really.
Yeah.
It was my choice. And so I really believe anybody listening to this, no matter how dark the past has been, no matter how shitty the stories have been, doesn't matter if you've been married 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, in a singular moment, you can decide, okay, I'm all in.
Yep.
And what that looks like is whatever you need that to look like, want that to look like, and create. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Because I think if we're waiting, if we continue to live in waiting for someone to prove to us, or I feel safe enough to then go all in, you're never going to get there because you're constantly going to be looking for and finding all of the reasons not to.
And think about if you were on the opposite side of that. If you're on the opposing side of this, you're like, I'm waiting to trust you.
Exactly.
How do you think that person feels? Like, oh,
Totally.
I can't screw up. How do we?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's not a very authentic place to come from. Of being like, okay, it's almost like you're being tested to be good enough.
Totally.
Like,
Totally.
how about you just trust me?
Right.
Well,
and here's why that's huge is I made the choice to go all in for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I really hope, I want people to really pay attention to this. Like we talk about this all the time. You have every possibility to break my heart, to screw me over, to wrong me, to hurt me, whatever. Very real possibility, right?
You're way too cute.
I'm way too cute. But the truth of the matter is, like, I chose to go all in for me because it elevated me to a different level. And I knew that in order for me to have the relationship that I wanted to have, I didn't do it for you. I didn't do it for the world. I didn't do it for my kids. I did it for me.
Yeah.
And what I really want people to hear in this is understanding that if I'm holding on to shit, I'm wronging me. Not wronging. I'm fucking myself over more than anything.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this right now and you've got shit that you're hanging on to, you got a chip on your shoulder, you got a couple of those cards in your back pocket you're waiting to use in the future, you're fucking yourself. Period. Period. You will never have what you want. You will never have the relationship you want. You'll never be met. You'll never be able to meet anybody. And like when I made that choice, that was for me.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how long you've been married. It doesn't matter the state of the game. You choose to go all in for yourself. I choose to not hold on to shit for me, not for you, not for us, not for some future euphoric moment. And that's the same thing that you look at all of the decisions you're making in life, like I'm doing it for me.
Yeah.
I'm getting fit for me. Benefits are you look good on stage, you look good naked, but I get in shape for me, right? Like I tell the truth for me, not because I'm worried about you or you or you or you. I do it for me. And so I really want people to understand, like, you going all in, quote unquote, forgiving, getting rid of all of that shit is one of the most powerful things that you'll do for you. Mm-hmm. Now, the caveat to that is people go, well, yeah, but what if they don't? Or what if they, what about they? 100%. If you say but, you're wrong. If you say but, you've already screwed yourself over in this. Mm-hmm. You do it for you. Yeah. And this is something that I think is really dope about our relationship is I had never really truly gone all in before. And I realized now, hindsight looking back, that was the reason that I had a lot of distrust. That was the reason that I had a lot of anxiety and angst in my relationships is because I wasn't there, right? Mm-hmm. And what I have learned is that everything that I quote unquote fear could be real. Yeah. You leaving, you fucking the pool boy. We don't have a pool, but if we had a pool boy, imagine the pool boy, right? All of those things are very possible. They're very real. Any of these things could happen. All of your fears, guys, could absolutely come true, right? Or not.
Yeah. Or not.
Or not.
Yeah.
And what's really, really, really dope is giving you all the keys, being all in is what empowers me to live the life that I'm living.
Amen.
It's what allows me to love the way that I love it. It's what you're giving yourself the permission and truly like exposing yourself to potentially be quote unquote hurt, to potentially be quote unquote wronged. But what if that doesn't happen?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And you live in this state of, I can't truly give you everything because I'm scared of what would happen. But yet, if you really stop and think about it, one of the most powerful things a human being will do is to go all in, is to trust. Because what if that's like that single action between you and a phenomenal relationship?
Yeah.
You and a phenomenal business. You and a phenomenal, at the end of the day, if you're listening to this right here, right now, every storm that you've been through, you've made it through, right? You've gotten to this point. Nothing's killed you yet. If you're listening to this, nothing's killed you yet. Like literally, you can't be like, well, that was the worst. It might have been terrible. It didn't kill you. You're here. And you obviously have the financial resources to either have a computer or a cell phone or something to be listening to this to. So you have something going for you, right? Mm-hmm. It hasn't killed you. And so it's one of those thoughts where it's like, what would it look like instead of living in this place of fear and angst and reserve and holding on to this? I need to protect myself. I need to have this ace in the hole to like, I'm all fucking in and anybody could say anything to me, do anything to me. But I know that I'm completely fucking free because I'm all in.
Yeah. And I was just thinking like how it's almost like people hedging their bets.
Oh, it's crazy.
Like,
I did it. You did it.
Oh, for sure.
Years.
For sure. And that's why I can relate to like the patterns of being in that space. Cause like I totally was in that space and I used to do all kinds of stuff like that. And it's way more common than not. It's way more common than the energy around being all in. It's like thinking, I'm just like trying to think of an analogy. Like imagine like you're like stuck in a room forever with someone. Mm-hmm. You can continue to just pile up shit and separate everything and be really, have this energy with it. Or you can just like make the best of this amazing space you're in, knowing that you're in it together. So many people want to have a backup plan, or they want to have, or they keep like little door, like the door cracked open for something else. And that's truly, that right there is crutching the growth of their all-in relationship. Because it's like, you have no idea what's possible, but if you're doing that, it's not possible. You can't energetically do both. It's impossible.
Right. And I think that's huge because you and I had one of my non-negotiables, one of my rules, my,
your
boundaries was that we don't ever talk about divorce.
Yeah.
And when we got together, it was like we talked about this. Like there is no option for exit. Right. Now, I mean, like you said, it's not a codependent, unhealthy place. Like there's boundaries and rules and the whole thing.
We say that with
but knowing that
asterisk.
like we don't throw that around. We don't use that when we're pissed. We don't argue about that. That doesn't there is no option to just fucking quit this game.
I know that if I say the word divorce, I better be planning on signing divorce papers.
Yeah.
That's literally the boundary of our relationship for both of us.
We talked about it before we got together, and this is important, I think, for people to understand that like what you're talking about is when you know that you're all in, you know that like there is no exit plan, there is no backup plan, there is no like, I'm going to hang on to these things just so in case this does end, then I'll be like, okay, cool. I won't have gotten hurt as much as I possibly could have, Right. It's one of our rules is that doesn't come up. And we had one argument, one disagreement, like right after we got married or whatever. And, and you said something like, so what are we going to do, get divorced? And that was like...
And I didn't... And what's crazy is I didn't even realize, like... Because in my head, I was more of just being like, what, are we going to get divorced then? Mm-hmm. And in saying that, and the power of words of what I know now, I'm like, damn. And I even then, I was like, why would I speak of my own marriage like that? Why would... It has nothing to do with your boundary, but why... And I want y'all to think about this too. Why would you say that about your own marriage? Mm-hmm. Do you not respect it? Do you not honor it? Do you not think it's worth a damn?
Right.
Well, then why are you in it?
Right.
And that to me was a huge, huge eye-opening growth opportunity for me, where I was like, there's literally no reason that should ever come out of my mouth. Mm-hmm. And it won't.
Right.
Because I realize, like, the power of words are massive, guys.
Right.
Like, if you even knew the power of words. We've been on this kick with words for a couple months now, and it's like you realize it's called spelling. They're spells, right? And this is super hippie, but these are like mantras, things you repeat. They're your mantras, your subconscious, the universe. Like all of this is energetically, you're attracting whatever you're speaking. And when people even say nasty or catty things, I'm like, ugh. Like we even joke. I do it with you sometimes. You'll tease about something. I'm like, no. Mm-hmm. Like that is no room in our relationship. Right. And even if you're kidding, you've gotten to the point now where you're like,
okay.
Yeah. Because if we really, really, really realized how powerful our words are, we wouldn't say half the shit we do.
Yeah. Well, in that same, along that same line, if you realized how finite and little most of the things are that we make big, you would laugh, right? We talked about this with, Andy and Emily and Jason and Jocelyn are really good friends. I always ask people, like, what do you guys argue about? It's like, I'm fascinated with other couples. What do you guys disagree on? And both of those couples rarely disagree they disagree, but they rarely argue, rarely fight. And both of their answers were the same. And this is why I think you and I don't have very many disagreements or whatever. Don't. It's because you're focused on big shit.
Yeah.
And so I'd have you consider for a second, if you find yourself, meddling in the little teeny things of life, perhaps you and your partner, perhaps you and your significant other are not focused on big shit.
Yeah.
Perhaps you don't even have goals together. Perhaps you don't have, aspirations and things that you're working towards. If you're constantly finding yourself talking about yesterday, pissed off about something they did, you're focused on some really little shit. Yeah. And there's a high probability that 95% of the shit that you're arguing about, disagreeing about, worried about, hanging on to, having resentment around is so fucking insignificant and so irrelevant to the big picture of your game, the big picture of your relationship. It's mind-bending. Yeah. It's absolutely mind-bending. So my suggestion around that is to literally step back and look at the things that you're mad about, the things that bug the fuck out of you with your spouse, with your significant other, whatever. Chances are it's so finite and it's so insignificant, yet you're focused on that, which means if you're focused there, you're not focused on the big picture. Yeah. You're not focused on your growth. You're not focused on your connection. You're focused on like it's like the crumbs on the floor versus the steak on the table. So long as you're focused on those teeny little crumbs, the steak's right fucking in front of you. The steak being this euphoric, deep, dope relationship is literally right in front of you, but you're so busy looking at the little teeny bullshit crumbs that you never fucking feast.
Yeah. And most of what we're mad at in others is what we don't like in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And think about that, because I find myself like that all the time. If the kids, with the dogs, with you, I will get irritated with something and I will step back and I'm like,
it's really not that big of a deal.
well, most of the time though, I'm like, that's something that I just don't like because it's something that I struggle with.
Yeah.
Like impatience, right? I'm like, I hate when people are impatient, but I'm like, I'm freaking impatient. And that reflection too is very, what?
Said you are?
That reflection is so humbling too, because I see a lot of couples, and I used to be like this, is I would judge my partner so harshly. And it's like, who the hell am I to judge you? Like, am I perfect? Was I born flawless with endless wisdom and no bullshit and no hormones and no blah, 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 blah? Like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm so incredibly far from perfect. And if you truly want to be loved, like, you have to love and acknowledge that you are flawed. You are growing. You're evolving. So is your partner.
Right.
So instead of holding them to the flame every time something happens, how about you just see it as this is a human on it? And I already mentioned this in this podcast, but like, see them as they're growing. Right. They're also, we stumble, we fall, we get back up, we grow. Like, you are not the judge. And if you are the judge, you've got a lot of fucking problems. Because Karen, you're not perfect.
Well, that's kind of what we were talking about at the beginning. It's like the whole forgiveness thing, like realizing that so long as you hang on to shit, you're causing that division in your relationship. You're causing that disconnect. Yes. So long as you're not all in, how do you expect anything from your spouse? How do you expect anything from your lover? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I find myself even, I will have, if you get really in touch with like the difference between your thinking and your feeling, I get myself in trouble every time I'm thinking through something. Like, especially if I'm irritated, I'll think about it and, oh, well, Lord, it's way worse now because we've thought about it. Instead of feeling, it's like, how do I actually feel about this? What is this actually going to do? Is this actually going to serve me? Is it really going to benefit my life? Or is my ego just so hanging on to conviction that I'm right, or it's like 99% of the time my mind is wrong and my heart is right. And that's the other thing too, is like really surrendering to your partner in that space in your relationship of being like, what do I really want? And we've covered this in other podcasts. Like, what do I really want? I want to be happy.
Right.
I want connection. So this is probably not going to give me that. So why am I hung up on it?
Yeah. Final thought on this. Like, you and I talk about this all the time. Like, I struggle with this for a long time, man, because I have a massive ego. And a lot of people, I think a lot of men listening to this probably could relate to that, right? But like, when you look at your partner, like, this is your partner, okay? If you're not going to be all in with your partner, who are you going to be all in with? I mean, if you're not going to be completely fucking candid and completely honest with your partner, like, who are you going to do that with, right? Yeah. Like, we as a culture and a society are so quick to talk shit, to gossip about the person that we are like the most connected to.
Yeah.
I believe this. There's no, when we chose to create this relationship together, like there's no one that comes in between this. There's no one that comes before this. There's no person that I'm going to talk to about shit if I'm not going to talk to you about it. It doesn't happen, right? And I want to say this just because there's a commonality. There's a I don't want to say commonality, but it seems to be okay in our culture and our society to treat our relationships as if they're this like second thought, like this, well, I understand why you would gossip because it's got to be hard being married to that guy or to that gal. Now, fuck off, man. Like, this is your person. If you're struggling right now, like, literally just don't even just look at this person and be like, this is my fucking person. This is my husband. This is my wife. Like, hey, we ain't going anywhere. I don't care if you've been married 1, 2, 7, 10, 12, 15, 20 years. Be like, I'm committed to this person, and this person's committed to me. Like, this is my fucking partner. And this is something I do frequently, like with you. Like, you drove me fucking crazy yesterday. I was pissed off yesterday. I wanted to punch a hole in the fucking wall yesterday. And literally, I went to the gym and I had a so-so workout, but I sat there looking at, one of the things that I like to do is I'll look at pictures. I'll look at pictures of us, and I'm like, this is a singular moment that I'm pissed off and she's doing some shit, but this isn't our connection and our relationship. This is just one of those trying moments. And I really feel strongly about this in the sanctity of a relationship, in the sanctity of a marriage, in the sanctity of a family. If you're not treating your partner as your fucking, like, I hate the term ride or die, but your ride or die, like, this is the person you go to first. Mm-hmm. This is the person you speak all of the words to. This is the person you give everything to. This is the person that you, like, have vowed to build with.
Yeah.
And if you're in a spot where, oh, our relationship is boring, our relationship is this, it's just mundane, guess what, motherfucker? That's because of you.
Yeah.
Not because of her, not because of him. If you're sitting here looking at your relationship being like, well, there's too much water under the bridge, or there's too much this, or there's too much that, like, that's 100% on you.
Yeah.
That is 100% on you. And as God is my witness, and you know this, and a lot of people listening to this know that the grass is greenest where you water it.
Yep.
The grass is greenest where you water it. And if you're watering your friends and all these other people and all these other things, don't be surprised why your relationship withers up and dies.
Yeah.
If you're not ruthlessly every single day watering your relationship, looking at your person, giving them everything, don't be surprised why it dies. Mm-hmm. Don't be surprised why your sex life sucks because you don't talk about it. You don't get excited about it. You don't invest in it, right? Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really passionate about this, man. I lived in that space for a while where I didn't have the ruthless connection to the sanctity of my marriage. Yeah. And, you know, that's something that I think is probably one of the most powerful things that we have. Hands is down. Like, nobody comes before this. No one comes in between this. There's no girlfriend you call to gossip to or talk to. If you're gossiping at all, anything that you and I would not be talking about, you know? Yeah. And this is something I think is really, really, really important for people to do is to go all in on that person and be like, this is my person. When I'm winning, we win. You falling, you being this, you being that, doesn't help me. It doesn't serve me. Right. You know what I mean? So
I love it.
Any thoughts on that?
No, I think it's awesome. Cool. I hope people take it to heart. Yeah, truly.
Guys, forgive. I mean, we're all doing our best. It's something that I keep telling myself every day. I love people watching.
Oh, I have something to say real quick. Guys, this is for you. There's this guys always tease about when their woman's hormonal, and how it's like it was. Well, actually, I shouldn't say his name. I won't. I almost did. One of our friends was like, "Oh, I take off for a week every time, like her shit goes down." Just so you know, that's when you'll probably have the best sex, because like it's all rearing to go. Just maybe change your perspective on that too. Sean knows this.
little tidbit of information.
She may be a little crazy, but the sex is crazier too. You're welcome.
I mean, there's truth to that.
I know. That's why I shared it, because maybe your wife hasn't told you that part. Yeah. Yeah. Silver linings.
Unsafety is a word. Well, we just found out Bryce.
Grammar police.
Bryce checked.
I'm unarrested.
Unsafety is apparently
unarrested a word. Okay.
I did not know that. I do now know that. All right, guys. Forgive, but more importantly, like, write new chapters, man. Life is way, 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 way too short. And I constantly think to myself, like, is this something in 20 years that I'd be worried about, pissed off about, angry about? No. Is this something that is going to have long-term ramification on my life when I'm an 80-year-old fucking dude on a rocking chair? Should I be pissed about
like
this?
That guy at the restaurant last night.
Okay.
Freaking rat cowboy.
He was badass.
He's the coolest old dude ever.
Yeah. Anyways, guys, go all in. Anything else you want to say, babe?
I love you.
Love you
and
too.
I love that we have this platform to talk
about this stuff.
Be so open and raw. And this is our last one of 2021.
It is, huh? Great year.
It's a great year.
It's a great
kids.
year. We hit almost every single week. We've missed the baker's dozen or so. Not that many.
I think we've done 36 episodes.
But when did we start?
Past a million downloads.
When did we start?
That's a lot of ears. Yeah. That's like 2 million ears. It sounds bigger and better that way. Thanks, guys.
I think we're done for the day. We're done for the year. We're gonna hit the reset.
We're gonna go ski now.
Yeah,
snowboard.
Guys, we love you. Thanks so much. If you got some if you got something from this, or if you know somebody that needs to hear this message, please share it with them. And then don't forget, please comment, like, and engage.
And love
We
your
love
people. Just go have fun.
Yeah, go have fun. All right. See you later.
Bye.
Cheers.